Tag, and welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is Jakob Nierenz, who is a freelance cellist based in North Germany. He is also a founding member of Ensemble Reflector and current principal cellist and board member of that ensemble, as well as the cellist in the Rothko String Quartet and the Ovanima Trio. And we'll be talking about how 2020 changed his perspective and mission of what it means to be an artist in today's world and his clarity to re-examine classical music and its place in our collective culture. Welcome, Jakob. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Patty. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I've been really wanting to have you on the podcast for a while because you're just so much fun to hang out with. So thanks for joining me today. We've spent most of our time together at Rice University in Norman Fisher's cello studio. We were studio mates, but we actually first met at Tanglewood.
Absolutely.
For you, that was the summer before you started at Rice. And so it was an opportunity for you to actually meet some of the Rice people. So I was, I guess, one of those people because I also was starting Rice the same year you were starting. So we were kind of incoming class together. But I also remember that we were stand partners. I remember having so much fun with you. And then we were never stand partners at Rice, and it really bummed me out.
True, yes. That was totally something we kept complaining about until the end. So that's something we have to make happen in the future again.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, Mr. Fisher, of course, was there who helped me a lot with this big decision to go to the US and do my master's there. But really being there with people like you and knowing that I will have a lot of awesome friends already coming to Houston made the decision really easy for me. So
yeah,
no regrets ever there.
Yeah, I'm now kind of dipping into your fond memory or story. So since we were the incoming first year masters, we did orientation together, and that it was sort of that first day at Rice was a vivid memory for you. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Absolutely. I mean, just the feelings I had in my first days in Houston were just nothing I ever experienced until that point. Being born and raised in North Germany and never having really left that area until then, and then all of a sudden finding myself in the US, which is my mother's home country, but nevertheless, Texas is a whole different deal than the East Coast. And that's the only part of America I have seen. So this whole going to Texas, living there for the next 2 years, getting into this really intense program, it brought up a lot of feelings and insecurities. And I just remember being there with you and kind of going through orientation and walking the campus and having this feeling of like we're studying here now. Going through that with you was very helpful, I think, for me personally, and comforting in a way. And it was comforting for both of us to sit there together and go through it. And yeah, thanks for being there.
I mean, likewise. Yeah. My funny story, and I feel like I should apologize to Norman Fisher up front for this, but there was one studio class where we were sitting in the way back. I hope you remember this as I'm saying this. This was a time when on Snapchat, people were doing the face swap filter all the time. And so we decided, like, let's just see if we face swapped. We were sitting back there and we were doing the face swap, and the results of this face swap, I was almost going to like pee my pants laughing because it was just so ugly. Like both of us like, oh my God, we should never do this again. And yes, I do have the photo. So
yes,
I will post this.
Great.
But it was one of those things where we had to contain our laughter because, of course, A, we're not supposed to be doing what we were doing. And B, it was just so funny, yet we couldn't share it with anyone. So then I remember people kind of looking back at us a little bit like, what are they laughing at? And we are just like, we can't. Anyway, I just thought that was one of those.
The new kids, the new silly master's students not having their stuff together.
Right, exactly.
No, I have to disappoint you. I don't remember it, but
don't worry. I will show you the photo and maybe that will bring the memory back.
Yes, I'm really excited for that.
Anyway, Jakob, are you ready for some Spitfire questions?
Probably not.
Oh, are you ready now?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, yeah, sure.
Mozart or Beethoven?
Beethoven.
Shostakovich or Prokofiev?
Prokofiev.
Netflix or video games?
Video games.
Basil or cilantro?
Basil.
Harry Potter, Star Wars, or Lord of the Rings?
Neither.
Oh.
Yeah.
Symphony or chamber music?
Chamber music.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Favorite practice room?
I mean, I'd love to say Seiji Osawa Hall, hall. Because in a way, playing there was also practicing playing in a big hall. And for me, like playing chamber music there was like one of the always the coolest experience of Tanglewood somehow.
Yeah.
Playing in that hall, because I always felt like it gave me so much to play there, you know, to learn. Seiji Osawa Hall at Tanglewood.
Yeah, that's a great, beautiful space too. And of course, when they open up the back and they show the lawn. So for those who may not have ever been to the grounds, it's this beautiful, gorgeous hall, which is where we do all our chamber music. It's also where the Tanglewood Music Center Orchestra performs. And there's an opening in the back at the very back end of the hall. And it opens up to this beautiful green hill where people can sit and picnic and drink their wine and cheeses. And we've, as fellows, watched these amazing performers like, Yo-Yo and Cavacos and Emerson and whatnots perform. And we're just sitting in the green too. And it's just a lot of fun. But anyway, yeah, I'm just trying to paint a picture of that beautiful space. All right. Favorite professor shout out?
Norman Fisher, for sure. Best thing that happened in my cellistic life.
Yay. He's the greatest. Anyway.
I owe a lot to my undergrad teacher too. I totally give credit for like motivating me to go for it. But what Fisher gave me in terms of organization and technique and just the skill sets for the future and really preparing for a professional career was amazing. I want to name both, but they're both very important to me. And in the end, looking back, I got more than lucky with my cello teachers from undergrad and grad.
It is so funny how that is so influential when you get those perfect teachers at the perfect time of your development in music.
Exactly. And I consider myself lucky having found the right people, you know, the support that came from Mr. Fisher, of course, but also from my undergrad teachers. Wouldn't be here doing this, what I'm doing now, without them. So
yeah. Yay. Most inspired musical hero of any genre?
That's there's been so many in the past. It always changes whenever you have a moment where somebody especially captures you with their playing. So I think for me the most inspiring person to play with was Nicole Mitchell, who is a flute player. She's the head of the jazz department in Pittsburgh, and she came from classical and has the jazz background, obviously. And I got to play on stage with her one time while she was on tour in Europe with her Black Earth ensemble, and she's based in the US, so they just for one concert they needed a cellist, and that was such a striking time seeing her leadership and how she really created a group of loving people who love what they do and have empathy for each other, and just trying to create a fun atmosphere where everyone can thrive. And I thought that was such significant and amazing leadership that I just haven't experienced by a conductor, for example,
or like without ego of some sort.
Absolutely. So that was one of my most incredible moments, also having some people from the Silk Road ensemble in this group, and just so much fun improvising. There was so many different influences of music, but in the end it's just about togetherness, and you don't have to put a label on what the music is, but it's just all these different styles coming together. We were on stage with Japanese traditional instruments, with Arabic instruments, and it's a great experience.
That sounds amazing.
Nicole Mitchell and her Black Earth ensemble.
Awesome. Most transformative performance experience?
The last year in 2019, our ensemble Reflector had its first edition of our own Ultrabach Festival in Lüneburg, which is my hometown, also is a city which Bach lived in and studied in for a little. And so we created a festival, of course, around his name, but also trying to really engage with non-professional musicians in the city. So we had the string orchestra from like the city's conservatory for non-professional musicians, and we played concerts with amateur orchestras, and we had a final performance where we played some Bach arrangements by Stokowski with this amateur orchestra, which was such an amazing experience. After this concert, the whole ensemble was crying, and it was very emotional performance, end of the festival, people. And for me, that really was one of these moments where I felt again like how much it is about the community and the love in music and how much that gives me. And so seeing everyone after this concert just being completely vulnerable and open in a way was incredible. And only music can achieve that in that way. I'll never forget that.
Yeah, that's why we do what we do, I think, is to have those
Yeah.
moments together. That's awesome. Next piece you'd like to learn?
Ooh, I just received in my mail actually a piece by the composer Jalilou Calvert-Nelson, who is based in Switzerland, but who's an African-American composer from Oklahoma.
Oh.
And I met him last year when we played a show in Berlin, and he was in the audience and we connected. He's a very good friend of our friend William Overcash and Nathan Watts also. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
And he's been really inspired by the Weinberg cello preludes for solo cello. So he's been starting to write his preludes, and he wrote the second one for me, which I just got in my mail, and I hope to premiere it soon. Yeah.
That's so cute. I love when you get pieces that are in dedication to you. I mean, it's like how touching.
Totally.
Awesome. You made it through the Spitfire.
It was fire. That's the most important.
Okay. All right. Can you walk me through your musical origin story? How did you find a cello? How did you get into music and the path that led you to where you are today?
So I grew up in a household with two parents playing the violin, being teachers, and a brother being a percussionist. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was kind of inevitable that sooner or later I would pick up some instruments, and which I did really early. And it was noticed that my tendency to put the violin between my legs and hold it like a cello. But what I really wanted to do is play double bass because that impressed me the most. So what I did first was take percussion lessons from like age 4 to 13 or so. And then the cello was my second instrument and kind of here, take this instrument until you're big enough to play double bass.
Got it.
Yeah. And so I kind of started playing the cello, and I guess the first 10 years of my life are not really well remembered in that way, which is also good because nothing terrible happened. But sorry, maybe that's a little deep.
No,
but so I guess cello was the instrument that just kind of stayed. And I think what really got me excited about cello playing was starting maybe at 10 or 11, like playing in my first orchestras and playing with people. And so that's, I think, also over my teens is what kept me going with music, because I was really not the person to practice all day. And I was, I think, fairly lazy. But being in orchestra, that was, I started doing that with 11 and I still love it. But that was also as a cellist, that had been my focus. And then coming to Tanglewood and doing the BUTI program several years before TMC, before the student program, this kind of gave me the entry into how awesome chamber music also is. And now I think I find myself somewhere in between, really loving ensemble playing in general, ranging from small chamber groups to large orchestra.
Can I clarify something? So you grew up in North Germany, but then you also went to BUTI, which is Boston University
Tanglewood Institute. Yeah.
You just visited America for that, or did you also live a little bit in Boston area?
No, but my mom went to BU for her bachelor's and she went to BUTI. And so Tanglewood has been this name for all my life because she went there, and it was, it provided some of the greatest moments in her young life as a musician. So Tanglewood was always a destination. So I was living in Germany and then decided to apply.
Over. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And
what made you decide to do music professionally?
I think it was the sense of not having any other options, but then also for me, there was nothing else I wanted to do. And so I even dropped out of school early because in Germany, you don't need a high school degree to start university in music. And so it was kind of a short-term decision, kind of seeing that my grades were not really great and didn't look like I would succeed with a high school degree because I was was very uninterested with everything. And yeah, luckily in Germany, there's this paragraph where for the arts, your main qualification just has to be how you do on the instrument, and you don't need a high school degree. Not everywhere. And so very lucky circumstances in that time too, because my teacher, he had just got a little teaching position at the university in Bremen. And so I started studying with him there on short notice, still thinking I would be in school by end of the year, but then auditioning for university. And that's how that went.
Okay, so you went straight into university. How long is that program?
So I did a 4-year bachelor's at the University for the Arts Bremen. And at the same time, which is really cool and you don't see so often in the US, I think, is that German orchestras usually have like an academy or an internship program.
Right.
And so for 3 years, I got to, on a frequent basis, go to Hanover and play with the North German Radio Philharmonic Orchestra, which was really great, kind of experiencing the professional mindset early. And they were so generous of having me there for 3 years. I'd like to think that was also a big part of my education and my bachelor's, just having this real experiences of playing in a professional German orchestra, which is really great with great soloists and everything. So that was great. And I was in that time, we also founded Ensemble Reflector, and a lot of things look great freelance wise also. But I had the feeling my bachelor's was not so great for my personal development on the instrument, because I would basically gig so much, and the school just being really like, I could manage to be out of school for a month and would still not get in trouble at all. So yeah, I was kind of in university, but also had like a foot in the working world already. And I think that was also part of my decision to go to the US and to go to Houston, to have this chance to just be in one place and really study everything, because I had to catch up on a lot.
It sounds like a different system, one being a little bit more flexible,
Right.
and one that is accommodating for people to make a living simultaneous to studying. But then Rice is an incubator and it's highly intensive. So even though you can still do gigs and stuff, your primary focus is going to be learning your instrument, soaking in everything that school has. So like that's its job, you know what I mean? So that's where I just see it as very different fields of pedagogy in a way, with pros and cons to both.
Exactly. I think I had maybe both extremes in that way. That made it a good
balance.
And just a great education I can look back on. I'm happy with how it turned out.
And then after you graduated.
So we graduate at Rice, and I was thinking about doing a third year in the US, but also this was a really strong feeling for me. Even before I came to Houston, I knew that I would go back to Germany in 2 years, because I left behind a lot of things like the ensemble, for example, but I thought I want to go and learn and get better at playing the cello. So, so that I can hold a position, like a principal position in this ensemble. Yeah, this idea of going back was always there and I never really questioned it. And so after 2 years and after graduating and having this really intense time, I went back, lived with my parents for a year, freelancing, and did a couple of auditions. At the beginning when I came, was not really happy with how they went and thought, okay, I'd rather focus on freelancing then and keep on building what I have now. But then the orchestra in Lübeck, where I am sitting right now in my apartment, they approached me and asked me if I wanted to audition for an assistant principal job, kind of filling in for a woman on maternity leave. And so luckily I played the audition and had that job for 2 years, which was...
That's great.
I think, yeah, it was nothing I expected. And we know, of course, that Rice produces a lot of audition winners and people who have orchestra jobs. And funny enough, I not always saw myself there in my time at Rice, but then going back and having the training that we got over there, especially in audition preparation.
Thank you, Chris French. Yeah.
Right? Shout out Chris French. Yeah, but that kind of made it right for me. Like I earned to hold a job for a little and do that, even though I also knew from the beginning it's not what I will be doing my whole life.
Yeah.
Because of, I think, the staleness that comes with doing the same thing the whole time.
Can I ask you the difference between an American orchestral audition to at least a German process? Like,
well, I haven't done American auditions because they kind of scared me. Just the intensity. Yeah, without having experienced a real audition in the US.
Sure. At least
I always had the feeling they were a lot less intense in Germany, at least. One striking difference, which I already noticed at Tanglewood, was the way I will never forget this, how somebody, a cellist from the Boston Symphony, told us, guys, the excerpts are important, but you also, you should really take care of your concertos. And I thought that was interesting because for me in Germany, it's exactly the other way around. And like usually the excerpts were the thing people would neglect more than, or not neglect, but right. But that playing the concertos. And I think there's a difference there that's at least for cellists and violinists, you have a classical concerto in the first round and maybe some excerpts. And then there will be the romantic concerto round. And that's just always there. You won't have auditions with only excerpts. You will maybe have auditions with only concertos, but not the other way around. And so I thought it was really, really interesting how that focus was just different.
But I also found it interesting that you said that the orchestra came and invited you to audition. That's not usually how it happens with an American orchestra system.
Right.
So that seems a little bit more of a personal, association of like, hey, we know you're playing, we know you, and you're reliable. How about you just do this little process and let's see if you fit in, versus a cattle call, which is generally how there's also minutia in the American system as well. Like you can be auto advanced and things like this. But yeah,
I think the difference there was just that it wasn't a tenure track position.
Oh, I see.
So they were just trying to really find somebody they knew and trusted they could work with instead of trying to find their next assistant principal cellist. So
sure, got it.
It's not normally how it works. And I was lucky because as a freelancer the year before, I had auditioned for them, doing some freelance gigs with them. And so it was just me showing my face at the right time and kind of everything coming together in that way. And
got it. Yeah.
That's how it happened.
Are there tiers as well throughout the audition? Maybe the preliminaries, then finals. So it's similar in that way as well.
Yeah, we have preliminary auditions, and we just make a distinction between preliminary audition and then main audition, where you have multiple rounds, and usually 2 to 3, sometimes 4, and the last one being the final round. In Germany, we say I was in the final round. But also interesting, in Germany, you don't say you were in the finals for something.
People don't brag about that.
No, interesting, right? It's just
right. In America, it's like
just different. Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry, but please continue.
So yeah, we find ourselves in the summer of 2020, and I'm kind of between having the offer to do another season with the orchestra, but then at the same time thinking, okay, it will only be another year, and then I still have to find something else. And so it seemed like a good time for me to stop doing that job and coming back to my personal projects and trying to push for those and go for those will set me up for a happier future with music. So that's where I am now, I guess. We really took our summer for granted, I think, because I was playing concerts and there was like the sense of it's gonna be good and we can keep doing this. But then starting November, everything, I mean, it makes sense that it's just the winter months are the worst for a pandemic or with a pandemic.
Right.
Yeah, so we're back in lockdown, but I felt very lucky and was thankful for the things I was able to do during the summer and beginning of the fall, especially, knowing how unique that is in the world right now, that there's so much cultural life. So felt very lucky in those moments being able to play. And those were also really memorable concerts, like this first concert after several months, because when the pandemic kicks in and before that, I'm in this flow of playing playing multiple shows a week, basically the whole time. And you're locked in performance mode, you know?
Yeah.
And then 5 months later, playing for the first time in front of an audience, you know, and it feels like a setback in that sense that you're just not as cool inside. And it feels like you lost your experience of being on stage and just like in shape. And so I felt really out of shape, though I had practiced. But those were just extreme conditions to play concerts and really weird feeling, but still so thankful I got to do it.
Yeah. So Jakob, would you like to take a break?
I'd love to take a break.
Okay, we'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. So before the break, Jakob, we are having a hard time to really boil down a statement of what you wanted to talk about in this segment, because a lot of things that we were mentioning, they all kind of coalesce into one idea, which is what I said at the opening, but it's also very open-ended. So I'm not really sure in which direction you want to start. Well, I guess you know what? I do know. You mentioned how 2020 really opened your view of what it means to be a musician, the relevance it is to be a musician and an artist in this time. What was that spark? Because there's just a lot of things that happened in 2020.
Yeah, for sure. It was the murder of George Floyd and, you know, the protests that unfolded. And at first, also this feeling of, wow, this is also a conversation in Europe now. And people are protesting in Europe and people, you know, are talking about the problems of racism in Europe. I think that has gone down by a lot, like talking about these things, but for me personally it was still a very significant moment because it led to me saying or reflecting for the first time that I am only playing, you know, the main repertoire I'm playing is by white dead men or by, you know, Western European, you know, by our greats, and being exposed to everything happening on social media, and especially seeing many of our friends together starting initiatives and trying to deal and make things better. And that inspired me a lot. So it was kind of perfect for me leaving my job in Lübeck, which I love being there with an orchestra of really, really nice and great people, and still having the feeling like this is not what I want to do and this is not what I can identify with anymore. Just doing that, and it just changed my whole perspective on what classical music is for me personally. And I mean, I can only say that now I want to see diversity everywhere, of course also in programming, but I want to see this diversity for everyone else, but also for myself, because I know it makes me so much richer. Discovering so many composers last year of color, female composers, all the composers aside from our canon, just gave me so much and a direction to go. Like, I don't know, just this sense of purpose again. Like, yes, this is, of course, like there is so much that needs to be done. And so that's really the mindset now, I guess, but it developed from the things that happened in the summer and that happened in the US, and they had a deep effect on me and also my colleagues from Ensemble Reflector. And so we are starting conversations in the ensemble also of what can we do. And like our artistic director, for example, is very firm on saying like even the most conservative orchestra can completely stay in their repertoire but have 50% female composers. It's no problem because they're all there if you take a look. And this question of what we play and what we represent will just become more important in the future, also to connect with younger generations. Mm-hmm. But then classical music is also so beautiful because maybe no other musical art form can pull many generations. It can gather, you know, all the generations.
I was about to say is that classical music is a snapshot of the past, is a snapshot of history, is a snapshot of what people enjoyed and listened to back then. And it's all relevant now because that's where pop music and rock music and jazz all stemmed from some of these traditions. Not all, but some, right? And I think that that's where when the argument comes up for, okay, roll over Beethoven, let's bring in the new generation. Yes, I agree. Like maybe we should roll him over a little bit, but you can't really take away the master works because that means you're obliterating some part of history. I don't know, maybe that's a controversial topic or idea. But I do think that it is important to bring relevance to the composers today and of composers that we've overlooked in the past. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that.
Absolutely. But for me, it was just also this development of realizing, like talking about programming and stuff and the diversity within our programming. For musicians, I feel like that's the easiest, the first step. Like
exactly.
That's really what we can do. But for me also, which then over time and just having conversations, like talking about these things, I also realized there's, first of all, last summer, it wasn't a moment to just jump on. For me, it was really a moment of realizing I have to also change inside, and there's so much inside of me that I have to rethink. So it's also been like things like, you mentioned masterworks, and I think this word takes away from so many other works in a way. And I feel like the determination of what a masterwork actually is doesn't come from anything objective, but just like from our tradition of how we grew up with, important works, I guess. But at the same time, through that, I think we learned a little that, there are these masterworks and then there are works that are not masterworks. So they're like less, right? So that's just something where I try to work on myself, kind of getting rid of this mindset. And for me as a musician, I feel like it is more important to go out and play all the music and play as much different rep from different people as there is, and not being the one to decide on if this is the next masterwork of the 21st century or whatever, but just doing the work and trying to create times in which we see representation, for example, just in programming, or also, with the musicians on stage, with the conductors. And you see that, and the goal being that a new generation grows up with that.
Right.
And that becomes the new normal, kind of, that of course we create spaces where everyone can potentially have a seat at the table. I think that was an important realization, because one of the first things we did there was a grant opportunity here in Lübeck after I first month out of my job, and you could hand in an own project. And so we were like, let's do a Black Composers Matter concert, and we wrote the text and we found harsh words for the classical music industry, and all that was great. But the more we got into it and thought about what can we actually do, that sustains longer than just this moment where everyone has attention on it. Of course, it's still a great idea to play a concert of music of Black composers. And I think these concerts maybe have to happen more at the moment so that we can get to a point where we can mix everything again. But I think there's such a lack in representation in classical music that a concert just with Black composers, just with female composers, is absolutely always justified, in my view, in my personal view. So I'm taking this into my work with the trio, with the quartet, with the ensemble. And I think the biggest part really was just talking to a lot of people about this and about, their experience with it. And I feel like 2020 was really the year of some rather difficult conversations, but everyone at the end realizing how important, how good these conversations are, and that there is a lot to look back and maybe rethink, and if it's just for ourselves. And I think that's the best way we can start, like with really examining what's going on in our own heads. And I can say from my experience, of course, it wasn't really until I came to the US for the first time that the color of my skin mattered, because I had to put in the rice application, I had to put my race and stuff, and that was never the case in Germany. And so my parents prepared me in this way. When I came to the US, they said, well, you're Black, so don't walk around with hoodies in the middle of the night and stuff, and so they for sure prepared me in that way for that. But still, I find I'm a really privileged person with how I grew up, which privilege was lucky, I guess. And based on, I think it would have been a whole different story if I had grown up in the US, for example. Privilege would have been another one. So this was not something that I thought, for me, finally, this topic is raised, but more like for my mom, like finally, because I know she has been dealing with racism in her life and in classical music and in the US and in Germany.
Right.
And I just haven't in that way at all, I have to say, which is part of it is me not being aware of microaggressions until fairly recently.
Okay.
Like just not really getting that or understanding that, but also being in a very protective environment and having the luck of throughout just being judged based on my character. And I consider myself lucky and privileged.
Thank you for sharing that, because I do think it's important for people to know that not everyone's experience with their ethnicity is the same. And I think that it's really important to hear that your response to George Floyd's death really changed how you perceive what you're doing in music. And I also want to say thank you for correcting me. I think you're correct after explaining that it is an outdated term to use this term masterwork. Why? I guess in my defense, it just came out because it was something that we throw around all the time.
Absolutely.
But you're absolutely right. Why is it this way? Why do we normalize those composers and not others? And why do we always deem them? Yeah, I guess my point is that's insightful. That's the inner work that we can do for each other.
Absolutely.
And to point that out to each other as well.
Yeah, but doing it in a compassionate way, because I don't judge you for saying that.
Sure.
Or like in the beginning,
you can, but
no, but that's the thing. We also have to, it's important that we acknowledge where we come from as a society and that there's just a lot of work to do. And maybe there is people who really think now's the moment to change everything and to be radical with that. And unfortunately, just the negative part of that just being like cancel culture, which just doesn't do anything for us either. Like, I think there's so much that has to change, but I'm not willing anymore to do that in a radical way, but just try to talk to people and hear what they think and just saying, oh, maybe I think this and that, but doing it in a respectful manner and not trying to cancel people for thinking what they've learned also oftentimes, because it's not, people aren't programming only white composers because they're racist.
Right.
Like they're doing it because that's how it's been done. That's what we know.
But that's what I'm saying is what is so great about what you're saying is this holistic way of saying, look, this is what our job is now, is to create a more representative canon. And then from there, hopefully, generationally speaking, we cultivate an audience that's going to appreciate, we are the trendsetters almost, in that way. It's not even, I don't want to use that word, like manufacturer.
That's right. That's just an open discussion we can have right now, because I don't know. But that's why it's important to have these conversations, because basically we have to figure out all together how we change and what we change and if we want to change, right? So, of course, there is this business perspective, but then I think, again, we have to think about, maybe we have to be the absolute opposite and don't have business models that are built on, selling as much tickets and getting as much people in as we can, but providing something meaningful for the community around us. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's every orchestra in the world and every artist in the world can take a look at their surroundings and just kind of see, hey, what's needed. And so when I look at my hometown in Lüneburg, I see so many opportunities, especially for educational programs for everyone. And I dream of us being there as an orchestra, and there's just this heavier focus on this educational aspect of our music making. And by education, I just mean like bringing people together and being inclusive in a way that also less this elitist classical thing where it's, the orchestra and the big artists are on stage and then there's the audience far away. And it's it's not close. So I think these relationships, and I've noticed with the work that we've done with Reflector and Lüneburg so far, that what kind of made us want to go there is the people and our audience and how close we are with them, because the audience is also, every time we come and play a project with 50 people, all the musicians, instead of a hotel, stay with families in the city who provide, spots for them, because we are not even paying our musicians fully yet.
Right.
I think for me, that's just a much more fun mindset and path to follow in the future, is to think like what is needed and where can I engage and do something for people, and in a way give back. And being at this point and thinking about this stuff also comes from a position of privilege. But at the other hand, I think exactly what the privileged amongst us have to do right now is to step forward and try to do something new with classical music. I just feel like there's a longing and a need for that for everyone. With classical music, we can transport messages of love, hope, compassion, and everything that can help a community to heal or deal.
I do think that that's a really important point you bring up too, is the geography of things. We should be more ambassadors and just go and really visit some more places, or finding opportunities in other places that need the same quality and level of music, and sharing stories and culture through music.
Yeah. And so with that, I'm so pumped for the future. I'm like really excited. And I needed that last year too, coming from just doing the classical music business, yeah, we know it. And there aren't really any surprises anymore. And so I guess you can only surprise yourself and just go for more or something different. And I think with that always comes growth. So I've been enjoying that process a lot. I'm now at a point where I'm just really excited for putting in the work that is needed, and talking about it is always
the first step, at least, right?
Yeah, and a major part of it, and like getting everyone on board, or at least, hearing everyone's perspective on it.
Well, thanks, Jakob, for bringing this topic. This conversation is ongoing.
Exactly. And while we do things, we maybe step in wrong directions, or we're on the wrong foot at times. But let's keep doing things and discovering together, what may be the right way, or the right way forward, or whatever it is. It is impossible to always cover everything when we talk about things.
Okay.
And there's just so many perspectives that the best we can do is talk with each other. And I'm really thankful you had me on. And had to talk. But
I'm grateful thank you. Yeah.
Likewise, that's what it's about. So yeah. I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Sure, of course, anytime. Can I ask you two final questions? They actually also might be repetitive of what we discussed, so feel free to just say, that's exactly what we just talked about. But the first one being, what in your opinion is the most common misconception of classical music and the classical music world?
Maybe that practice makes you a better musician.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Or a better artist, because I feel like practicing makes you a better craftsman and makes you better at, when I train, like in sports. For me, that's similar to practicing and just getting, the technical stuff done. But I think artistry then comes from everything else, from experiencing difficult moments, experiencing emotions, I think, and then being able to transport them on stage. So yeah, I wouldn't say that practicing makes you a better musician or artist.
I think that's a really interesting answer, and I think very relevant as well. I mean, we're taught from, the mantra, practice makes perfect. Well, what does that mean? What is perfect?
Exactly.
Or how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, practice, practice. Well, okay. I mean,
right.
There's a lot more that goes into that outside of just sitting in your practice room and having a metronome on.
I don't know. For me, it's important for me to make this distinction, because so many times I just felt not like an artist, and I felt not like this is something great, because I think the role of an artist is like really reflecting the time. And in classical music, we kind of often do the opposite, and we're like more of a museum, you know, and it's not musicality that gets us into orchestra, but it is that really near to perfect technique. And that's, again, I think there's more of a focus of that in the US. I have the feeling from what I've learned at Rice and Tanglewood that the artistic part of it and the individuality of everyone is more valued in auditions than it is in the US. But also at the same time in Germany, I feel like it's hard for me, even being like assistant principal of an orchestra, to really have an influence on artistic decisions or anything. I mean, I just sit there and play the way the conductor wants. And so for me, being able to do that well, those are like craftsman skills. But when I think about programs and I try to think about the room and the audience and for whom and what I want to transport and what message I want to have, that's for me where the artistic part starts. So I guess for me also, there's been a break last year in like wanting to get more closer to the artist in myself. And I mean, it has so much to do with personal growth. And so practicing is, of course, necessary and an important part of what we do. But I just don't feel like I can call myself an artist. And I feel like that maybe people are a little bit confused about the differences. And so being aware that it's also a craft that we're working on and that we're doing, for me, was helpful, realizing that, and then knowing in moments when I felt satisfied as an artist and when I did my job in a way.
And the final question, after all the impact that COVID has done to classical music, what do you think is something positive that will enhance and carry on in our profession?
You know, like George Floyd's murder was nothing unique or new or, you know, I mean, things have been messed up for we know how long. And so I think without COVID and without all of us sitting at home and seeing it in real time, almost like happening and seeing the protests, I think that created an energy that maybe wouldn't have created such circumstances, I think. And so this only could happen, like this change for me, for example, only could happen because of COVID, but in combination with what was happening. So before COVID, you know, we would have been that much too busy that we just care a lot less about, you know, another Black person being shot in the US. And so just this combination made it so strong. But for me, talking about all these things and these conversations, everything that developed from it, for me personally, I view as positive. And so there were a lot of chances to learn a lot and to reflect a lot last year. And so hopefully people now have a better idea of what they want to do in the future. I mean, also that is, you know, you can only do that from a privileged position, because there's also a lot of people in the world who have completely different issues than thinking about how horrible the things that I'm seeing from my home on the sofa, on my, you know, iPad or something. But this combination of things made it so heavy. And that's why, for me, at least, it had such a heavy impact. But like I said, for me, it's absolutely positive. And I wish that it and hope that for all my friends and many other people, it had the same effect, that they can, even though it, of course, there's so much uncertainty in the future and how it'll be, but that we realize, okay, this is also a chance to start something new and get new ideas going, because we were all knocked out of our everyday busy as hell life. So I think for me, that's something really positive and really needed to happen for me. And
to like hopefully continue to reflect and self-check about the things that we do.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's a really great answer. Thanks, Jakob.
Thank you.
Are there any platforms or websites for our listeners to learn more about you or any upcoming projects?
Yeah, you can follow Ensemble Reflector's work on ensemble-reflector.de. And then I have my Instagram page, Yakitori75. And yeah, and there you'll also find some info about my string quartet. And that's the best way to see what I'm doing.
Cool. And Reflector is with a K instead of a C, right?
Yes, it's the German spelling. Yeah, exactly.
Great. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, go ahead and press that subscribe button and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The reviews and ratings really do help this podcast be more visible to others, and it's a free way to support the podcast. Another free way is to tell your friends and family about it, and you can always become part of the Haydn Behind the Music Stand family by donating to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Haydn Music Stand. Don't forget, there's a Spotify playlist available that contains all the pieces we've discussed on the podcasts. It's all really, really great music, and the link is always in the description of each episode. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Haydn Music Stand for more content. Thanks for being on the show, Jakob. It's so great to see you again. It's been way too long.
Yes, likewise. Thanks for having me, and let's keep in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for listening.
Say bye, Sushi.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Cut the.
No, it's good.
Cut whatever.
Yeah, okay.
I think I said some things I wanted to say there.
It's fine. You're good. You're good.